What is up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Steelers Preview. I am Jeff Hartman, joined by the triumphant trio. I am one of the three, Brian Anthony Davis. What's up, Brian? How are you?
I'm so glad to be here. Wow, it's post-draft. Next week, pretty soon, we're talking schedule. It's moving right along.
Is that official? Have they announced that the schedule's going out next week?
Usually it's about like 2 weeks after
Last year it was late, I
after the
think.
draft.
Wasn't it? Wasn't it like the end of the month last year? I can't remember.
It's usually around my daughter's birthday, and that's the middle of the month.
Okay. Dave Schofield. What's up, Dave?
All right, to actually answer the question about this, Brian's right. It has been in about approximately 2 weeks after the first night of the draft for the last 2 years. So this would be 3 years in a row if they do it then. Before that, they actually used to do it the week before the draft.
Yeah.
It used to actually be before the draft when we were coming on and doing stuff with that.
Yeah.
So I guess Brian and I got to get crack-a-lacking with our schedule predictions and all that good stuff.
Yeah, that's tough stuff. You know why I think they've changed it now is because they want to see who's drafted and who's even more attractive for that Thursday night, Monday night, Sunday night game.
And I think that's smart. I think that is really smart because let's say you have, I don't know, do the Bears play the Patriots or the Commanders this year? Because then you'd have those rookie quarterback matchups that you're expecting. Like that, you would want some of that on some of these matchups. I get it.
Probably. I think they do. Well, they were both last place teams, so yeah.
Yeah.
I bet you they do.
So that is typically on Thursday, which on that evening, we typically go live after that and we talk about the schedule and we break it all down. It's hard to believe that last week at this time we were in our live stream ready, or close to in the live stream.
I was going to say we were about 10 minutes away.
Yeah. Getting ready. And it was a lot of fun. I know that all of you have said this on multiple podcasts. I'll say it here as well. Thank you to anyone that tuned in to the live stream or to our day recaps. It was a blast. I didn't know what to expect. We had done a Zoom call as a staff before, and it was fun, but I'd never done it for the masses to see. And so, as Brian likes to say, we tore down the fourth wall, and you all could see exactly what it was like sometimes. Sometimes it was very podcast-ish. Sometimes it was just off the cuff. Let's have some fun and watch the draft. Well, I think we'll do it again next year. I would love to do it again. You guys against it?
Not at all.
I don't see we can turn back now.
Yeah.
That was.
Well, I mean, we had 1,200, 1,300 people at some point, and this wasn't just on night one, and even on day three, people were filling in on day three.
Day two was the biggest. The biggest viewers that we had viewership, and I don't know, maybe it's because people watched like the broadcast in round one and they wanted to see the picks come off the board. And they didn't want to be spoiled. I don't know. Anyways, thank you to everyone that tuned in. If you didn't, that's fine. Thank you for tuning in right now. Whether you're listening in audio or whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or X, Twitter, we've got some news to discuss. We've got some big news. Dave, did you want to bring something up
about the draft? I just have to say one last thing about the draft.
Go ahead.
If it didn't do anything else for us, what it did do was have me go on and on about Chris Lafferty's glorious mustache, so much so that now Brian is attempting one.
Yeah, that's true. Are you
starting to hurt,
Brian?
though? Yeah, this is about a week.
You can't tell that?
I can see.
It's starting. It's starting.
Oh, wow.
It hurts, though. But it's coming in gray. I look like Dennis Farina. If you don't know who Dennis Farina is,
I know that.
Yeah, I'm starting to look like him. But with all the gray coming in, it's not as dark. It's really light. But it hurts, so it's probably going to go soon because I don't do facial hair.
You've got to get past.
You got to get past the itchy stage.
Yeah, they have like mustache conditioner.
They do. You got to go to the mustachery. Yeah. And again, if you've never seen A Million Ways to Die in the West, you wouldn't get some of the mustache jokes. But all right, let's talk about the news. That's okay. It's okay. Let's talk about the news. The big news today, and this is Thursday, was that the fifth-year option deadline was at 4 p.m. Eastern time. The Steelers had to make a decision on two players, technically, Justin Fields and Najee Harris. It was reported earlier a couple weeks ago that they're not going to pick up Justin Fields' $26 million cap hit for the fifth-year option. That didn't shock anyone. The Steelers did not have anything official. They didn't have anything official or even reported from beat writers about Justin Fields. Brian, did that surprise you?
Not at all. No, I feel like I actually feel like both guys actually go hand in hand, but we knew. I mean, it was foreshadowed that this wasn't going to happen for Justin Fields, so that's why it wasn't talked about today.
Dave, was that surprise you at all?
About Fields? No, because when they don't pick up the options, they don't really announce it. The Steelers don't make an official announcement that they didn't exercise the option. They only make only if they did. And because it was reported before about Fields, it was not really stated.
I thought for sure the beat writers would at least say like they declined both, just kind of to get it out there. They didn't, but the surprise, that might have surprised some people, but the surprise for most, at least for me, was that Najee Harris's 5th-year option was not picked up. Coming in under $7 million, just under $7 million was the official total. Brian, when you heard that, what was your thought?
I had a couple thoughts. The first thing is the position really devalued? That makes me wonder that if they're like thinking that, hey, behind the line that we're building, maybe we cannot afford Najee Harris. Maybe the situation with Saquon Barkley encouraging Najee Harris and Najee Harris having the writing on the wall about how running backs don't get paid. Maybe they're thinking ahead that it might be a problem, or maybe they have something in the works and they said, Najee, we're not going to go ahead and pick up the option, but we're making plans to give you an offer. So that could be something like that, because that's the same thing. If you go back a couple weeks, it almost seems like they said the same thing about Justin Fields. We're not picking up the option. I mean, the rumor came out that they're not picking up the option, but don't worry. He's in long-term plans. We just can't go $25 million for that. I know it's not that much for Najee, but I feel like maybe they just don't want to give either one the option right now and then go ahead and do business a different way.
Yeah. Dave, what about you? What was your initial reaction to the news that Najee Harris's option was declined?
Honestly, my initial reaction is, what are they thinking? It's not like it was breaking the bank. It was under $7 million. I mean, they did Bud Dupree's, what was that, 4 years ago or whatever it is, when it was over, it was over 10. So I'm like, Najee Harris, he started, I said this at Stat Geek this morning, in case you missed it there. Najee Harris set a record for the most starts of any player in the first 3 years of their career, regular season wise, because he was in the first class that had 17 games in a season. He's tied. There's only 2 people that started every game in 3 years that were drafted that came out in that they didn't have to be drafted, but started in the NFL that year. And that was him and Creed Humphrey. That's it. I mean, he's been his longevity and everything else. He's produced at the 1,000 yards. So it's not, but I know some people are saying, oh, but is he really that? Or he's been a good pick, even if you don't like running backs in the first round. And it wasn't all that expensive. So the only thing that I'm thinking that really, because it didn't make sense for the Steelers to decline it. To me, the only thing, it's not the only thing, but one of the best possibilities I can think of is they maybe said, hey, Najee, we want to talk to you. We're doing this. We were going to pick up your 5th-year option for that, unless you have a large objection to that. I wonder if Najee Harris was like, please don't do it. I would rather, maybe that was part of it. I don't know if they had discussions with him about it or not. If they're handling it just from a business standpoint and not including him in the process, I don't get why they didn't, unless it was that Harris didn't want it. Because now, I mean, is he insulted by not having it picked up, or is he happy that it's not picked up? That I don't know right now. But I don't think it made a lot of sense for the Steelers to not do it just because it wasn't that much. And you look back at the list of the players that they did exercise a 5th-year option on. How many of them actually played on that contract? TJ Watt didn't. I know. I don't know if DeCastro.
Minka didn't.
Yeah, Minka didn't. And I wasn't counting him because he wasn't technically their draft pick, but he was their 5th-year option.
They did have to pick it up then, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't check back as far to see about Cam or DeCastro. I know Bud Dupree did. He played on it. He's the only one I can think of that I know for sure did, because then they franchise tagged him next year.
Right.
So to me, it's like chances are he wasn't even going to play on that anyway if you really wanted to sign him. I just don't know what they were accomplishing. But even though I don't know, it doesn't mean that there wasn't a really good reason. It's just not known right now.
The more I think about it, the more it just kind of befuddles me. I'm not sure what to think. I feel like the Steelers are making a mistake. Dave kind of laid it out how they could have contractual control over him for another year, not break the bank. If he plays well, they could franchise tag him or one of the many tags that the NFL has available to them. And they could keep playing that out until basically they say, we've gotten everything we want from him, and now we're done, which is a very crude and shrewd way of doing business. But at the same time, this collective bargaining agreement allows them to do that. So it's an option that teams have. So players can't really bemoan the fact that they can do it when they have allowed it to happen. But at the same time, I was not surprised either. I feel like they're making a mistake, but I wasn't surprised because a couple things. Number one, he's not Omar's guy. And if we've learned anything about Omar Khan, it's that he is, everyone says aggressive. They say patient, blah, 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 whatever. The dude's shrewd. He's not going to wait. So you look at some of the deals that he's made, whether it's Chase Claypool, Chase Claypool's like, I'm not getting traded. See ya. You're in Chicago. Second round pick. Kevin Dotson's kind of like, you just hear this scuttlebutt going on in training camp and you're gone. LA. Say whatever you want about what happened after he left. Kendrick Green, we're not going to use you. We're going to trade you to Houston because we can get a draft pick. Philadelphia needs a backup and Kenny Pickett's no longer happy here. We'll see you later. So I'm not shocked in that regard because I think Omar Khan absolutely has a vision for this team and he sees it the way that he sees it. And he doesn't care if you weren't part of that vision. But Brian, how much do you think Omar Khan and his draft picks and that type of tenor has to do with this decision?
I wasn't thinking of it, but you have me convinced. The more about that, I really wasn't thinking about the Omar Khan angle. I'm going more with the angle that you've got Jaylen Warren behind them, and they probably feel like that's a cheaper option, and they're watching. Yeah, Dave always brings up the Verron Haynes 2007 contract being the last running back to sign that second contract. That's a long time. That's going on 20 years. A lot of people thought Najee Harris was going to be the guy that changes all that. But the whole game is changing. I mean, back 10, 12 years ago, you would have never seen Ezekiel Elliott go to another team. You would have never seen Saquon Barkley go to another team. This is just running backs are going to be on 2 or 3 teams. And it seems when they move to that second team, they're never as effective as they were with the first team. They're very rarely as effective. So I'm wondering if they just feel that there's a shelf life and they have to just one contract these guys.
Dave, what's your take on the Omar Khan angle?
Yeah, that's really interesting because there's also another way that they could look at this. They could have said, all right, I'm hoping they had a conversation with Najee Harris with everything going on. Because what they could have said is like, hey, Najee, you want to wait and see how things are after this year? Hey, if we want you that bad, rather than locking you in with the fifth year option, if we're gonna do that, we'll do it. We'll franchise you, tag you instead, which will give you more money. Possible. Maybe that's what they're doing. Like, if we want you bad enough, we'll use the franchise tag while we work out another deal. All right, and then that way you have more money to fall back on, rather than just and saying that they're not going to. But if they have that conversation, I'm not saying they did. I'm just saying if they did, which actually isn't crazy. The thing that's enticing about that to Najee Harris is you're not keeping him, quote unquote, holding him hostage for 5th year option, franchise tag 1, franchise tag 2, perhaps another 3 years. You're kind of rolling it back a little bit. Like I said, this is just me spitballing things that are possible. But for those people that are out there, they're saying, oh, Jaylen Warren. I like what Afton said in the live chat earlier. It's like, those two backs are complementary. It's hard to say that one would replace the other. Because so many people are like, oh, Jaylen Warren's better. Has he been in that role, though? Jaylen Warren is phenomenal in the role he's in. Sometimes you change someone's role a little bit. Could he be better? He could. Could he not be as much That's true as well. But remember, he's a restricted free agent after next season. So they would have to offer him a restricted free agent tender in order to keep him around, which isn't as much as the 5th-year option, but it's not the dirt cheap that they have him at now as an undrafted free agent. So there's a lot of question marks with that next year. So what we should do as much as anything is enjoy 2024.
Let's try to put Najee Harris into a tier. Okay, a tier of running backs. Brian, if we're doing these tiers, and let's just make it simple, there's good and there's great. Like there's great players at a running back position, and there's good players. Let's name a couple great players first. I'll start. Christian McCaffrey is a great player. Think of another running back that would fall into the great category, Brian.
Boy, this is tough.
No one's in that category. If it starts with Christian McCaffrey,
Christian McCaffrey is in that category. He's not like
he is that category. No one's in that category with him. The next category you have to.
I
would have somebody else.
Okay, so hold on. Let's do this then. Elite is Christian McCaffrey.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have great. So who's another great running back?
Let me give you great, and I don't care about the injury. Nick Chubb is great to me.
You know what? He would probably, if he wouldn't have been hurt last year, he probably would have been up. He would have been one that could go in with Christian McCaffrey.
Nick Chubb's amazing to me.
Yes.
Dave, can you think of a running back that's in the great category? Obviously, CMC is elite, but who's in the great category?
Well, I mean, it's so funny because I know someone was saying about Najee Harris in fantasy football. I'm like, we're not playing fantasy football. We're playing actual football, which means his value is so much more than it would be in a fantasy setting. But thinking of it from a fantasy standpoint, I'm like, who else would I put up there with Christian McCaffrey when I'm thinking of daily fantasy? There's no one that was coming close to his totals. I mean, even a little bit, it was Derrick Henry, but he's fallen off and now in Baltimore. Who knows what's going on there? I don't even know that I'd put him. It's a question mark of whether or not he goes in the great category, switching teams and being a little bit further down the line.
I'll give you one.
Okay,
give
me another
25. One. It's Josh Jacobs.
Oh, yeah, he would probably be up there pretty good too.
So this is
would you put Etienne up there? I don't know about that. He got his option picked up, and his was slightly cheaper than Najee because he didn't hit the snaps.
Jonathan Taylor is an interesting guy,
Yeah,
but
he's been dinged up too.
He's been dinged, but no, I mean, there's not a lot.
So I'm putting Najee Harris.
You make an argument, but yeah.
Okay, so this is what it comes down to. So we're doing the tiers. Which tier does Najee fall in? Good, great, or elite? Brian, what say you?
Above average? So good? I don't have him at great, but I have him right. I mean, I have him on the cusp of being, I don't want to say great, but being valuable.
Okay. Dave? Good, great.
Now remember, this is not from a fantasy football standpoint. I would put him at great because what is his best ability?
His availability.
He unlike all these. Now, does that mean he's due for that? That's what I kept saying a while about Derrick Henry. And as soon as I said that, boom, he missed most of the season. So that's one of those things you don't want to talk about. But Najee Harris is up there strictly from a volume standpoint because of his availability, which you can't necessarily. I mean, it's his defining characteristic as much as anything. But the thing is that could be gone in just a freak play. That's the problem with it.
So here's some stats here for everyone. So right now, if you're ranking it by yards, Najee Harris ranks 7th out of the top 10 in terms of yards gained. Now, Najee Harris
last year?
This is 2023. Oh. Najee Harris played in 17 games. Only Joe Mixon, James Cook, and Derrick Henry also played in 17 games last season in terms of the running backs. If you look at yards per attempt, Najee Harris was the second lowest at 4.1 yards per attempt. Only lower was Joe Mixon, who was 8th at 4.0 yards per attempt. And which is funny, Joe Mixon had 1,034 yards rushing. Najee Harris had 1,035. He got him by 1 yard. Najee Harris is 60.9 yards per game out of the top 10, was second to last behind only Joe Mixon, who is 60.8. So to me, it's a no-brainer that he's not in the great category. He's definitely not in the elite category. When you look at Christian McCaffrey's number, he's in a category by himself. He's in the good category. He is in the what?
Now look at the last 3 years combined. Where do you think he falls?
In terms of what? Yards?
In rushing yards.
Well, he was the only player the last 3 years to get 1,000 yards every year. So I would say he's in the top 5.
You're right. He's 4th. So Derrick Henry 1, Jonathan Taylor 2, Josh Jacobs 3, Najee Harris 4, Joe Mixon 5. Christian McCaffrey 6, Nick Chubb 7, Saquon Barkley 8.
No, you can't deny that stuff. Go ahead, Brian.
I want to talk about touches, though. His first year, he probably led in touches.
He did. He led the NFL.
He led the league, but second and third year, I think he was probably below average as far as touches go, because Jalen Warren,
one of three to get 250 carries in every single year the last 3 years. One of three.
Oh, wow.
Derrick Henry had more carries than him.
It just seems like they were de-emphasizing the run in Pittsburgh the last couple of years when they were not winning. And that's before they fell behind. They just weren't getting carries.
Yeah.
But I mean, you'd also got to look at the last 3 years. I mean, he's only been there except for the last 7 games with Matt Canada. And hey, they're lining up with these personnel in this formation. Guess what they're going to do? Run the friggin' ball. I mean, I'd have to go back and look at the stacked box stats. I mean, he sees so many of them because when they were running the ball, they knew they were running.
Yeah. And don't forget, number so-and-so is now tackle eligible. Wonder what they're going to do here.
Yeah. I think that for me, I know that I said that I think the Steelers are making a mistake, and I do stand by that sentiment. But I also could see why the Steelers would say, yeah, he's a good player. But if he has a good year in this scheme, which I don't know the scheme, I'd have to ask like Coach KT Smith. If the wide zone scheme that Arthur Smith loves, maybe they don't know if Najee Harris is going to benefit from that. He might struggle with that, in which case you could see why there's some hesitation. And if they say, look, we want to see how you do this year, and he plays really, really well and has 1,300 yards rushing and he averages over 5 yards a carry, he might have priced himself out of Pittsburgh. It's a risk the team is taking by not picking up the contractual control for one more year. The reason why I think it's a mistake is that it's rather inexpensive, in my opinion. You know, it's less than $7 million. So I don't want to go over this too much, but Brian, do you have any final thoughts about the Najee situation?
Yeah, what do they know that we don't know? And I think that's it. I feel like we can trust this group as far as knowing what personnel to know when to hold them, know when to fold them. And I just kind of feel like maybe I'm drinking too much black and gold Kool-Aid. I just kind of feel like they know something or they're planning something, and it might be good. I mean, it might be long-term planning for Najee. So I just don't know. All I know is that they've got some intel because of the Saquon Barkley stuff, and Najee's not one to not ruffle. He has no problem ruffling feathers. I will tell you that. He's not a problem, but he's no problem ruffling feathers. And there was a point last year during the whole when the Matt Canada regime ended that that there was some discontent with Najee Harris. So maybe it's some carryover. And maybe it's attitude that we don't see, or it's maybe they love him and they're like, bigger things are on the horizon. Just hold up. We got you.
All right, Dave, any final thoughts on Najee?
Well, the more I think about it is if they really are having concerns of, is he going to be the right back in this offense, blah, blah, blah. Let's see what we can do. Oh, we have to make this decision now before we've seen it. maybe they did think of the option going the Josh Jacobs route. Did not pick up his 5th-year option, but used the franchise tag. So maybe that's what they're thinking. Well, if we really want him for that 5th year, well, we might have to do that if something magical happens this season. But if something doesn't magical, something happens that's not magical, or it doesn't happen, I don't know. I'm not saying it right. They aren't tied to him for that amount for the year after this one.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to take a break. We've talked about Najee Harris enough and the NFL schedule. When we come back after this break, only on the audio side, we're going to dive headfirst into first-round draft pick Troy Fautanu, talk about him, our thoughts on that. We'll be right back after this break. All right, Steeler fans, we're back for the second part of the show. The title of this podcast is previewing first-round pick Troy Fautanu, tackle out of Washington. Dave, I believe you said this after one of our podcasts, and I agree. I thought the best thing that happened was Mike Tomlin came out after in his press conference and said he is going to play tackle. Yes. He made it very clear he's not a guard, he's not a center, he is a tackle. Before we talk about the pick itself, I want to ask you all about the process. I think the process is one of the few things that you can look back on, grade. I think you can grade the process, meaning, did you select a player that fits? Did you reach on a guy? That type of stuff, I think, can be debated, can be graded. You can't grade the player himself, in my opinion, until 2 to 3 years down the road. That's why on Dave's Stat Geek podcast this morning, he did that. He graded those draft picks that are now 2 years into their career. So let's talk about the process, though. I don't need a grade. What did you think about the first round as it unfolded? Go to pick 20. Yes. It's crazy that Fautanu is available, but he wasn't the only player there. Brian, what were your thoughts as it was unfolding?
Wow, this was crazy because I had my draft crush and they had theirs. But as soon as it happened, you just saw me go silent and think. And I'm thinking they got their guy. Then I found out that there was so much celebration and they feel like they stole them. And everybody talking, everybody saying, wow, this is a great pick after the fact, seeing that he was ranked 11th, maybe 9th on some people's boards, and the fact that he was there and what he represents. And I love what you both said because I was thinking the same thing. When Mike Tomlin just shut everybody down and said, this guy's a tackle, I just looked him up somewhere and it was like, hey, he's a top interior line, interior offensive line prospect. I guess this was old from last week. No, that's not what he is. And they addressed the interior in that draft too. So that was even more telling. So it's funny because we talk about plan, we talk about all this. Immediately after the pick, there were some people that were thrilled and the other people said, but they need a center. And then you have Dave, who I agree with him, and the thoughts saying that, well, are the Steelers the team that valued him as a center? Because there was one team that valued him as a center, and Dave brought that up. But when Mike Tomlin shut that whole thing down, and then you see the second pick unfold, then you see the 4th pick unfold being a guard. Wow, that's their plan. It's clear. So now the biggest thing with him now, and everybody's like, well, is he left side or is he right side? Who cares? As long as both those guys, Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu, are on the starting offensive line, then you win. You win.
Dave, what did you think about the process?
Oh, the process. Well, it's interesting because the first time I really started to look at him as a prospect was when I did him for a mock draft Monday. And I actually said I wasn't be a big fan of the pick of picking a tackle that's projected at guard, unless the Steelers really wanted him to tackle. And that was before any rumblings of center. Then when I heard the rumblings of center, I'm like, this could be what the Steelers think. Then there was maybe they liked him more to tackle. Then I started to look a little bit more, especially when I heard, the Steelers were bringing him in. There was some concerns. And the more I looked, the more I loved it. I lobbied hard for the FFSN mock draft that when he was available to take him over Graham Barton.
Oh, that was a battle.
It was a battle. I won.
Yeah.
But then I was afraid I was being too pushy, so I tried to back off.
I backed
other
you.
People agreed.
I backed you.
Oh, I know. So, but to me, a couple things about that is one, I still think it's interesting. Did the Steelers, when they brought him in because they had some serious concerns, were they trying to get other teams to think there was red flags for him so maybe he would be there? I don't know if they did. I've said that before, but if they did, I love it. That's a thing of beauty. I don't know that we'll ever get the answer to that. But the other thing that I actually was saying to a friend of mine who's a big Tennessee Titans fan when I was talking to him last night about the draft was, I think part of the reason the Steelers didn't trade up for him when I think they were willing to was because those quarterbacks going and the other options that were still there, they were content with other consolation prizes. Like I think if it might have been a Quinyon Mitchell or a Terrion Arnold that they were taking because Fautanu went with several. Until you had, if you had a group of guys together on your big board, until you get down to nobody else, you don't really have to move if you'd be content with any of them, even if they're not the same position. Last year they moved because they really wanted that tackle. They got down to only one and they said, let's move and get him. Yeah, maybe it was just a group of quality players that they felt, oh, we're going to have our choice of ones here and we'd really be okay. Unless some of them, maybe if a couple of them come off the board, then they might have tried to jump up. But I honestly think if you go back and if the Pittsburgh Steelers wouldn't have, not trading or anything, if the Pittsburgh Steelers would have had the 10th overall pick and not the 20th, I think after Rome Odunze, which I think I finally got his name right, I don't need to anymore because he's not a Steeler, went at 9. I think if they were picking at 10, they'd have taken Fautanu.
Probably.
Yep, I don't know of anyone from 11 that went from 10 to 19 in this draft that they would have taken over him.
And the thing is so I decided right before the show, I just Googled essentially just what were the offensive tackle rankings from different websites before the draft, before the draft. So according to PFF, love him or hate him, it's just a source. He was the 3rd. Troy Fautanu was the 3rd. And then when you think about
Alt and who was there
behind
too?
Alt and Fuaga.
They have
Yes.
So
not Fautanu? He was ahead of Fautanu. Wow.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So Walter Football, in terms of their rankings, some people could care less.
They're actually not bad. Some people
I like them.
Yeah, they're actually
years.
So they had Joe Alt 1. They had JC Latham 2. They had Fautanu 3. Fautanu 4. Fuaga 5. Mims 6. And they had Guyton 7. Kingsley Sumataya. They might not have him as a tackle now that I think of it.
Didn't you say Fautanu?
No, did I?
I thought you said him after.
All those
I thought you said him 4.
There's all those.
Or did you say Fautanu? Who did you say was?
Fuanga. Oh, there he is. He was 4th.
Yeah, I thought he was 4th. I thought you said 4th.
I'm sorry. So he was 4th.
You're getting your F's crossed.
He's a lot of F's. So then I went to CBS. Well, this is the last one we'll do. And I'm looking at these rankings, and the one thing I noticed in all of them is that like Amarius Mims went to Cincinnati. What, at pick 18?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get that they had there's a lot of upside there, but wow, this is crazy. CBS Sports has Fautanu ahead of Joe Alt, and then they have.
It's a little bit crazy.
That is a little bit crazy. They have him as the 4th best player in their board. They've got Mims ahead of Latham. But again, they don't even. I don't see Fautanu on.
I don't think Brian's uses CBS. And I thought he said that they didn't have him as a tackle.
They had him as a guard. Probably.
They had him as a guard. Yeah.
So I look at the process and I'm like, man, there's no way they couldn't take him, because if you're looking for a semi plug and play player, that wasn't Graham Barton. I do believe with all my heart that the Steelers did love Graham Barton, and that Graham Barton was a phenomenal prospect from an athleticism standpoint. But are you going to trust this guy, even if he has an IQ through the roof, to come in and be a center day one when he hasn't played center since his freshman year in college at Duke, that's a tall task. And I feel like while I don't think it's Kendrick Green from an end game standpoint, from a rookie standpoint, I think that's tough. So I thought the process was good. And I thought that they got really lucky. Something our source told us leading up to the draft is that the Steelers organization felt there were going to be teams that reached on quarterbacks. Yes, it was going to fall, and a lot of position players were going to slide back, and they did.
I'll also say this, but people thought they reached for Patrick Mahomes. So you just never know how it's going to work out.
That's true.
Yeah,
that is true. That is true. So for me, I love the pick. I thought it was a great pick. I had to learn about the guy. I didn't know a lot of detailed information about a lot of these players, but from everything I've seen, what's not to like, right, Brian?
No, there's a lot to love and there's a lot to feel comfortable with, especially when they go to round 2 and they get the guy everybody was screaming for in round 1, possibly 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I'll be honest with you, I liked him, but I thought he might be that guy that all it took was one team up there to realize to know they've really liked him and he could have gone top 10. I wouldn't, and I was really shocked he didn't go top 15. So although I liked him and was ready to grab it any chance I had in any kind of mock draft, I honestly didn't think he was a realistic option. I really didn't. I didn't think Quinyon Mitchell was a realistic option at 20 either. And then both of them were there. So you just never know how those things played out. But you know, then when he became a reality, then I could really get excited about it.
Yeah. So I love the relative athletic score, RAS scores. I think there's something fascinating about it. And Troy Fautanu is the tackle prospect. He scored a 9.45 out of a potential 10. That ranked him 72 out of 1,293 offensive tackles from 1987 to 2024.
Oh my goodness.
So
yeah,
the only knock on him for his relative athletic score was his size grade. He was ranked poor because he's not tall. He's 6'3".
Because he's a quarter of an inch short of what they want.
Yes. And then even weight, he weighs 317, which was a 7.35. So his overall size was not good. Now he didn't bench, but he did do speed grade elite. He ran the 40 in 5.01, the 20-yard split in 2.92, the 10-yard split 1.71. Those are all in the 9s, which is elite. His explosion rate, the vertical, he had a 32.5, which is a 9.4, a broad jump of 9.05, which is a 9.51, which comes out to a 9.41 RAS score, which is phenomenal. Now, we talked about Graham Barton. Graham Barton had a 9.99, which is insane. But go ahead, Dave. What do you want to say?
I was going to say you should know this as a personal trainer, health person.
Yeah, man.
There has to be context with the bench press.
Yes.
What's the main thing that you need to put in context with the bench press is arm length. If you've got short arms, you should be benching more reps. If you have long arms, you should not.
I put up a bunch.
Yeah, if you got long arms, and that's the thing with Fautanu, he has very long arms. The longer your arms, the harder it is to really, truly bench press, because that's not what it's really designed for. It's not even a very good measure of a long-armed person. Right. So to me, those are two numbers that you have to look at together, that someone might have a phenomenal bench press, but if that's because their arms are shorter, it kind of explains a little bit. Or they may be, they're a little bit light on the bench press. Well, look at the length of their arms. No wonder.
Well, that's true, because I'm good at bench pressing my butt cheeks against the bench.
And we've made it to the butt cheeks portion.
I was going to say, I knew there was something coming when he said, I'm good at the bench press. I'm like, where is this going? Where is this going to get?
See, and that's the thing with me. It was so tough because I was trying to bench press so much when I was in college. I had very long arms. So, and now I pay the price for it.
I pulled a chest muscle right before my wedding. They thought I was having a heart attack. And here that's the last time I bench pressed.
You actually lifted at that time?
Yeah, I was lifting. I was trying to get in shape. It was right before my wedding. I was lifting, and my uncle had died, and I was supposed to get on the plane to go read his eulogy in Texas, go to the funeral, and they almost kept me off the plane. They were going to send me to Washington, D.C. They thought I was having a heart attack, and here they realized that I was lifting weights, and I just pulled a muscle, and I pulled a chest mustle.
Yes.
I mean, they were going to air evacuate.
I feel awful. I feel awful that for the fact that you lost a loved one at that time. That's probably a very difficult story to tell, but you just hurt yourself lifting weights, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's typical.
It happens.
Nonsense.
Yeah.
But everybody was scared, and they're like, "You are not going to be able to go to the funeral." I'm like, I have to go.
Yeah.
And and the uncle that passed away was the guy who got me into the along with my dad, got me into the Steelers.
Yeah. So, yeah, Fautanu didn't bench. I'm not shocked he didn't bench with long arms. Dave's right. Even for my size, I do have long arms. I used to have a friend who had like the little arms, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I could bench so much." Like, I have to move the weight 6 more inches than you. What are you talking about? And so it is difficult. And Fautanu, let's talk about. He seems to be, and Dave, I'm going to throw it to you first because you're the offensive line guy. He seems to be tracking in the wrong direction, or the Steelers are, in terms of where the tackles are going. Tackles now, like everyone wants the 6'8" behemoth, like Amarius Mims. Like they want those giants. Who was the guy from Cleveland last year from Ohio State?
Juwan
Jones, another monster dude. And he held his own against TJ Watt, actually, when they went up against one another. Is there anything about you, Dave, that's like, man, this is trending in the opposite direction of the rest of the league?
Yeah, I get that. But when your arms are that long, that's a whole different that brings a whole different element too. So it's a trade-off with all these various things. You get a big behemoth guy, you got, as long as he's got to have the footwork in order to not get beat around the edge. The other problem with those guys is the James Harrison effect. What would he do? He would get under people.
Right.
So because he used his lack of height to his advantage. So it's all a trade-off one way or the other and what you're really looking for. To me, it's more about the ability, the athleticism, the nastiness, or you could even go with the way Jim Wexell would describe it.
Oh, yeah.
That I won't say. That got bleeped out when he asked it on Steelers.com. If you go back and listen to the press conference afterwards with Omar Khan, they kept bleeping that word out. Jim kept saying it.
God. Yeah. Brian, do you have any concerns about his size?
Not at all. No. If he's a quarter of an inch off, and that's just one of those things we've talked about, guys like that for years. If he was just this much taller, to me, a quarter of an inch doesn't mean much at all. Seriously, you might even have a better vertical leap. You might be able to do different things. But I don't think that's going to stop you from raw power and having good footwork and being able to do your job and protect your man.
So, Brian, you have to, I had to try to remember. Oh, yes. It's like the great poet once said, I wish I was a little bit taller. I wish I was a baller. I wish I had a girl who looked good and I would call her. The famous poet Skilo.
That's not the third line that we replaced that line back in college with something a lot less appropriate.
All right. Last question before we go to trivia. Quick, Brian, day one starter, Troy Fautanu, yes or no?
I'm going to say no, but he's a week 3 starter.
Okay, Dave?
No, because he's got incumbents to knock out and people might not like him, but Dan Moore's going to fight for a job, which he should.
Yeah.
I just think it's going to make everybody better. If the Steelers don't have to force him into the lineup, I talked about a little bit on Stat Geek this morning. You can go back and listen to it. They play the numbers game of getting them through the end of the season without overwhelming them. So unless they absolutely need him out there, I think they hold him off for a little bit.
I agree with you guys, but since you both said no, I'll say yes just for fun. All right, let's do some trivia. Brian, do you have it?
I need to go last. I'm having trouble with my screen, so if I could defer.
That's good because I have to leave after my trivia anyway.
Okay, Dave, go ahead.
Okay, I'm trying to. This was something that I had for during our draft live streams that I never got to, so I found a way to somehow make it about Troy Fautanu. But Troy Fautanu is a Steelers first round draft pick who has 0 games played in the NFL. But it won't take him long to pass other Steelers first round draft picks for games played. Now, we're not going to talk Broderick Jones because hopefully the two of them will be playing games together. Broderick Jones officially has 17 games played, not 17 starts, but he did appear at least in special teams in every game. Who are the players of Steelers' former first-round draft picks since the merger? Because we don't want to go back to guys that never played because it was the AFL, NFL battle and stuff like that. Who are the first-round draft picks that Troy Fautanu could move ahead of this year in games played?
Just games played, not games
Just
started.
Games played, not games started. Well, Steelers first-round draft picks.
Jermaine Stevens.
Okay. Jermaine Stevens, it would take him 2 seasons to pass him because he's just out of reach. He's at 19.
Really?
Yes.
Who was the guy that got in the car accident and got paralyzed?
Oh, Gabe.
Gabe Rivera. You could pass Gabe Rivera, who is not the last person on the list. He's the next to last person on the list. He's not the bottom name. He had 6 games played.
Okay.
There are 2 others he could catch this season.
Let me throw out what could be a crazy one here. Let's go ahead. This is career, right? Or first season?
Yeah.
Okay, career.
No, I think it was with the Steelers, but I think it really was career then too. I mean,
Okay, let's go ahead and oh my gosh, I just lost it. Dave Brown.
Correct. Dave Brown. I don't even remember because I did this over a week ago when he was drafted. We only had 13 games.
I'll tell you why. Dave Brown was.
Oh yeah, they lost him to the
Seahawks.
To the Seahawks,
and he's a Seahawks Ring of Honor player. Yep. He was a corner, and they had some good corners at that time. So that's why I was thinking Dave Brown.
Yes. And you guys were missing the one with the fewest games. This is the standard of terrible first round draft picks.
Huey Richardson.
That's why a couple years ago I gave Shannon a hard time. He did a worst Steelers draft picks ever and didn't even have Richardson on it. I'm like, dude, you missed it. That's number 1. He played 5 games. First round draft pick appeared in 5 games.
Jeez.
15th overall too. That was
and then of course
Chuck Noll's last draft too.
There's another player he can catch in year 2 with 25 games played as a Steelers first round.
Kenneth Shane Pickett.
That would be Kenneth Shane Pickett.
Yeah, I figured. All right, Dave, you got to bounce?
I have about 3 minutes. Depends on how long Brian's trivia is.
My trivia is ruined. I'm having trouble with my screen. It was all about how many Wilsons did they have, because they're going to have 3. It looks like they're going to have 3 Wilsons.
Mm-hmm.
Save it for next week, Brian.
I have another one for next week that it's going to take me a while to find it, but I'm going to find it.
Save it for next week. All right, so Dave, we'll let you go first with final thoughts. Go ahead.
Final thoughts are, I know with a lot of things that we didn't really get into tonight because I don't think it's a discussion worth having now until we see them on the field, is which side is Fautanu going to end up on? That's a discussion that we're going to hear it. I mentioned it when I was going over the draft picks. Once again, I'm saying on Stat Geek this morning, if you didn't catch that. But, he didn't start any games on the right side in college. He didn't. So, but I would kind of think that maybe he's a right tackle. We'll just have to see. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that the Steelers get the best 2 tackles out there that they can get. And this will be something that we could even still be discussing it at this time next year.
Yeah.
For all I know. But the most important thing is that you've got capable people to be out there. We're getting close no rookie minicamp this weekend. There's others going on around the NFL. The Steelers is the next weekend. Then the week after that, what is it? The 21st, I do believe, is the first day of OTAs. We're actually going to get some stuff of the Steelers out there working on stuff. Not a lot of reports coming in, but enough, and pictures and things of that nature that you can then get excited about football again. Ooh, I'm sure there's still moves to be made. It's the way Omar Khan has been since he took over, that there is going to be players signed, significant players signed after the draft. So we have that to look forward to. It's still, even though what might be the biggest single event for the NFL just concluded last week, there's still plenty going on, and I'm ready for it.
Brian, final thoughts.
How did you feel during that draft? Ask yourself that. Dave and Jeff and even I foreshadowed something that had nothing to do with the players that were being selected. It had to be with how we were going to feel afterwards. And we said that we feel like the Steelers couldn't really go wrong with this draft because there were a lot of different directions they could go in. If they missed out on Troy, they might have traded down. If he would have happened to have gone at 19, they could have traded down. You probably wouldn't have felt as good, but there would have been another pick there, and you would have felt good about that. But you wouldn't have had that peaceful, easy feeling that you had when they picked Troy Fautanu. If they would have went with Quinyon Mitchell, we would have been happy because it was a corner, but you would have felt a little less excited because the whole thing, the entire time, and we heard this even last year, you got to fix that line, got to fix that line. It kind of feels like it's fixed. And one thing that seems fixed more than anything to me is a position that we joke with Jeremy Betts about this, how we said, I'd be shocked if they pick a guard. But that pick of Mason McCormick was just phenomenal too. When you read more about that guy, and we'll be talking about him in a couple of weeks. So if you feel like me, that this was one of the drafts that you could just sit back and breathe it all in and just not even worry because in Omar and Andy we trust, well, that's how I felt. And I didn't have a concern in the world. Now, if you watched me on the broadcast, I was hoping, this guy's going to fall, this guy's going to fall. But I'm still happy with Fautanu, and I was happy with other guys too. Gosh, I learned about the sixth round pick, the second sixth round pick, and I was happy about that. So this is just a phenomenal feeling right now. And for the first time in a long time, you feel like the Steelers have the best drafting philosophy that they've had in a long, long time since those 1970s.
Yeah, that's well said. Well said. All right, that does it for us on the Steelers preview. Hey, we'll be back next week. I don't know if we'll be maybe we'll be talking about the NFL schedule. If not, we'll be diving into Zach Frazier as a second-round draft pick, previewing him and his upcoming season as a rookie with the Steelers. Brian, do you want to do what Dave does typically and send us out?
Don't know if I could do it well, but hey.
That's better than nothing. We'll see you next week. Take it easy.